name is Payton. I'm DDL Packaging Sales Engineer here with Scott Levy, Senior Packaging Engineer as well.
Morning, Alison.
Welcome back. Today we're wrapping up our two-part series to talk about common mistakes we encounter regarding sterile packaging that can lead to failures in your validation. We hope that you'll be able to take some valuable information away from this session and apply it to your own work. As we've discussed today, there's a lot of considerations to be made when choosing your sterile barrier packaging for successful validation. These considerations can seem daunting, but DDL is here to help early and throughout the process. Ultimately, we do want to see our clients succeed. Scott, what are some ways we as a test lab help our clients navigate some of these considerations?
Well, failures, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing worse than calling someone and saying, listen, you had a failure, right? First words out of their mouth, what'd you do to my package?
Mm-hmm.
I get that all the time. What did you do?
Because we're the test lab,
right?
You know, we're trying to bring
what did you do? You know, a lot of situations, especially being local in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, right? Twin Cities, and there's a lot of medical device manufacturers here. With those manufacturers, they stop in all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, one key thing of working for DDL or working with DDL is a phone call away. You're a phone call away.
Mm-hmm.
I've got questions. You know, this is what we do for a living. So helping our clients out to make sure they're not going to run into problems is key and paramount for me, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and the DDL staff. But with as many clients that we have, they will stop in with a prototype configuration to say, hey, Scott, what are your thoughts on this?
Mm-hmm.
And I try to help them out and point out pitfalls that I see. For example, product, right? Looking at the product. Well, there's flash on the plastic materials. Well, what's flash going to do to a pouch, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a pinhole. So,
Yeah.
or looking at a specific connector. Could be a lower connector and running my fingers over it, right? If it feels sharp, well, you know what? It is sharp.
Mm-hmm.
That's another. I mean, these are really, really rudimentary things. But this is what I'm looking at, especially for dynamics, right? To ensure that we're not going to run into problems. So we'll bring the entire configuration in. And there's been many times where I've wanted them to step back, look at their shipping configuration with the way it's orientated. We haven't even talked about the IFU. Where's the IFU going to be placed in the shipping configuration?
Right.
Especially with a multilingual IFU, when it gets heavy, that's probably the biggest mass considered to the product in the package. I can't tell you how many times a corner of an IFU has ripped an entire pouch. I mean, it's just those things that a lot of people don't take into consideration, that want a second set of eyes to help them to ensure things are going to run smoothly the first time. So the orientation, we've talked about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The tray versus a pouch. You know, I see a lot of scenarios where they're just trying to get things done fast, and they put a heavy product that's got a lot of different things going on
Mm-hmm.
inside of a pouch, no shelf boxes, the corrugated shipper. You know, just looking at that whole configuration before we even put it through testing, you know, I can give them a pretty good sense that 80%, I think 80%, you're in a good shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd pay particular attention to the product in the sterile package, right? That's key. The orientation. And then the other aspect is no shelf box, right? We talked
Mm-hmm.
about that.
Right.
What else do I want to look at? And those are pretty much the main considerations, to be honest with you. We'll also take a look at, you know, within that IFU and whether they even have it, or if they're just using paper as a mock scenario. You know, especially for transit, you want the entire configuration as a whole.
Right.
But helping them, you know, I kind of say it's, you know, the force is right here, the water's over here, and this is not what they do for a full-time job, right? They're not packaging engineers. So trying to give them a little bit of a semblance to what I feel is going to be a rock-solid configuration.
Yep.
Is pretty huge.
Taking a step back.
Yep.
Instead of go, it's like, let's take a step back. Let's look at this from
Breathe.
a logical standpoint. And have you considered this? Have you looked at this? And
Yep.
then you can see the light bulb go off.
Yep.
Oh, no, we didn't think about that.
We had another scenario. Before I get to the other scenario, we're talking about, you know, tray or inserts. You know, the HDPE inserts that are pretty heavy by themselves. And in that type of scenario, one of the customers had too much, I'm going to call it slop inside the pouch,
Sure.
right? It was in a shelf box, fantastic, was happy about that. the way they were folding it, wasn't happy with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most people think that if you fold a pouch, it restricts the product, right? You're causing so much stress before it even goes through dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell everybody that you want a gentle fold.
Yep.
Okay, not a creased fold, a gentle bend.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the scenario where we had, well, that much more pouch. The card's back here. Well, what's going to happen inside dynamics? You've got basically a missile. So, I mean, just, they weren't thinking about that, right?
Right.
Nor most people do, or don't, I should say. But that's just something that they're looking at. Well, they're going to fold it closer. Well, you fold it closer, you're running into more of a risk. If you look at the card, does the card have any flash on it? You know, I mean, we see a lot of cards that have fold snaps or fold, basically, you pull it up, product gets put down to it, right? The radius, is the radius generous enough so that it's not sharp?
Sure.
Or the card stock itself, is that radiused enough? Or is it too, the radius
rigid?
the radius is not enough,
Sure.
essentially, right? So, I mean, those are all considerations that when somebody brings in a configuration, this is what I'm looking for to try to help them out so they can do it right the first time.
Mm-hmm. I'm a huge proponent on feasibility studies too.
Oh.
I try to recommend that all the time.
Yeah.
If you're not sure, let's not move forward with the full validation until we do, throw a couple samples through distribution and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also prevention,
Right.
right? And you don't even, from my perspective, I wouldn't even worry about the sterilization aspect, right?
Exactly.
Just run a feasibility test to see how well that specific configuration is going to fare for how you're packing it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you might want to, do 3, right? You might have a couple different orientations you want to run. Maybe if we were talking about how they're put in there, maybe you want it on the bottom orientation, the side orientation, or the end orientation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's carte blanche when you're doing feasibility, but you're going to learn so much before you actually get into final validation.
Sure. You want that validation to go as smoothly as possible, so let's work out the kinks early.
Absolutely. We had a failure in validation a few days ago, and it was just a matter of the orientation. That was it. Looking at everything. And then we had a couple others, I don't know, about a month ago that I'm trying to understand what was going on, and it was a long catheter. Honestly, all packages, before you go through package validation, you want to inspect.
Yeah.
You truly want to inspect everything before they come.
Mm-hmm.
But one was a long catheter that was put into a shelf box. And, you typically, when you do catheters, you have a wall of boxes and you're loading, right?
Yep.
On that shelf box, you have the flaps on the side to close it up, right? One of those flaps must have been bent in because when the pouch went in, it tore it all the way down.
Wow.
And I'm like, the only place I can see this is loading.
Sure.
So I helped the customer get through that, and then I had them go back because they had to write capital to understand what was going on, right?
Yep.
So they went down to basically the processing area and witnessed this firsthand. So it was good that I could give them a little bit of direction on what to go look for. And sure enough, it's one flap that was in, they slid it in, they pulled it out in the same scenario.
Sure.
So, troubleshooting. I hate failures, but I like troubleshooting.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
To me, as a package engineer, it's kind of fun. I hate failures, but troubleshooting a failure is, I kind of like that. You're almost like an Inspector Gadget trying to figure out
Right.
where it happened, how it happened, and how do we mitigate it.
Right.
And for us working with customers and those engineers, that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really do consulting, but we kind of do. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you my educated guess on what to look at.
Right.
To help them, mitigate a specific situation. And I think the entire DDL family feels the same way.
Absolutely.
We just are trying to help bring safe, effective products to market.
We're all here for the same reason,
Absolutely.
really. We want safe products.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. We get a lot of customer protocols, right? So let's say we're going to start a validation. We have a customer, they bring us their protocol. What are some ways that we help them work through that?
Well, obviously reviewing the protocol, right?
Yep.
And if things don't look right, taste right, smell right, then we're trying to walk through to try to understand what they're trying to truly do. And typically, it's usually a pretty straightforward scenario, helping them rewrite the protocol or change things to make it flow better as well as to satisfy compliance aspects.
Sure.
We spend a lot of time with customers doing that. And to be honest with you, for the amount of time that it takes to go back and forth, it'd be faster and easier for us to just generate the protocol for them.
Mm-hmm.
I run into that issue a lot, but in a lot of situations you can't do that, right?
Right.
Customers are already 95% of the way through, but the protocol's got to be pretty spot on for how we're going to execute it. I get a lot of protocols ambiguous. Things are ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I mean, here's a prime example. You know, we talk about label inspection, pass fail, adhesion legibility, pass fail. Well, what does that mean? How much of it is adhered? How much of it needs to be? I mean, we're starting to get into a regulatory climate where pass fail in the past was very easy, but we're getting into a regulatory climate that things need to be buttoned up tight. You know, that's probably one of the biggest aspects with protocols that I deal with. Is things are just left a little bit too ambiguous.
Sure.
Or the testing is 90% of the way correct, and then there's 10% that needs to be fixed. Again, you know, most of these engineers that we're working with, this is not their forte, right?
Their day-to-day, right?
Their
right.
quality, manufacturing, this is not what they deal with every day.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to be able to help them out and helping them make sure the protocol A makes sense, the ambiguity is gone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Things are real clear and cut, because at the end of it, when the data comes and we provide them with data, that data is clean and clear, and that's cut as well.
Sure.
What do you see with customer protocols?
I see I see the ambiguity as well. So I cover that a lot with my clients, and I see a lot of missing testing too.
Yeah.
Where, you know, where's your label inspection? Have you considered that? And again, the light bulb goes off. Oh, we didn't think about that.
Yep.
So it's really going through and making sure that they're covered from a compliance standpoint.
Yep.
That's really key. And I love recommending the DDL protocol. I mean, if it's hard for them to get that protocol written for testing, let DDL take care of that.
Yeah, I'll usually, when I start to bring that up and bridge that conversation, they've got their process validation.
Yeah.
Right? They've got their product validation. These are all should be separate protocols. And in a lot of scenarios, like in a 75 or 80 page protocol, that's got everything in it. And
Sure.
Granted, that's fantastic, right? I would much rather see every one of those protocols stand on their own 2 feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you have a problem in the package validation, it's got the process validation, the product testing into it, what does that do to that protocol? So it's so much cleaner and easier to separate out all of these protocols as standalone entities and simply in your reference section, reference back to the process validation.
Your process validation.
Or reference back to your product,
Mm-hmm.
what you're physically going to do for your product validation. You know, again, it just keeps things very clean in case something should go wrong.
Sure.
So that's what, you know, we're talking about DDL protocol, right? That's simply package validation. You know, they're just simply going to put that in their master document file because they have the product protocol, they have the process validation protocol and execution, and then there's our protocol.
Sure.
It's just, it streamlines things considerably for the customer.
Tremendously, sure.
Yes.
Sure. No, that's great. That's great feedback. Are there any other success stories that you'd like to share with us today before we close?
I'll tell you that dynamics is one of the key and critical areas. Okay, aging has its problems in certain areas depending upon what you're dealing with, and it has landmines if you're not really keen and tuned into the standard, your materials. But dynamics is probably the key and critical area for what can truly go wrong.
Sure.
And as you're shipping packages every single day, to me that's at the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding your product, the weight of your product, the geometry of your product, and placing that in the correct package is key, is paramount to success. And a lot of times we'll go back to a client and we'll work through that, and they'll say, well, why didn't we just put this in a tray? And it's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of scenarios, we don't get questions up front or questions asked.
Right.
You know, Scott, I need a quote for the X, Y, and Z. Okay. But where the real DDL, what's the word I'm looking for? Where DDL truly can come to play is when something goes wrong. And the customer says, what are your thoughts on what caused this issue? And, you know, most laboratories won't go past just giving the data. And, you know what, that's not the way I want to be treated.
Right.
Right? If there's a problem somewhere and they can lend, or DDL staff can lend a hand with what we think may have caused that problem, we're going to do so. But dynamics by far is probably the key paramount aspect that you want to step back, look at your package configuration, look at the corrugated shipper, whether it's single wall, if it's a 32 ECT box, maybe think about going to 44 ECT if you're doing D4169, it's going to help you.
Sure.
Are we putting our bare packages in a corrugated box without a shelf box? Ask the question, why are we doing that? Right? Is it cost? Well, maybe it is cost, but just you want to think about it, right? You want to think potential problems. Now, you can't head off every problem. There's a lot of problems that come up that you can't head off.
Right.
You know, remember we talked about gentle folding or curling your package? Well, after distribution, those things are crunched up in the corners. How do you mitigate
rattled, vibrated.
How do you mitigate
yeah,
that?
Exactly.
There's ways to mitigate it by doing something to the product or putting something that's a little softer on the edges, etc. I mean, there's things that can be done, but those are things that you want to take into consideration for sure.
Sure. I think that's the true DDL value too. Is we're with you every step of the way.
Well, absolutely.
Call us up early. Call us after validation too. We want to help you throughout the entire process.
I've kind of looked at DDL and my career here, and I look at this, and I've told a lot of people this. I look at it as the golden rule. How do I want to be treated? If I have no clue about something, how do I want to be treated? I want to be educated, right? I want to be able to go tell my boss and put in the best foot forward. I've got the right company to do this. They know what they're doing, and to me that's important, right? Again, we're not selling razors. Right? We're not shipping pens. Yeah. This is all sterile devices. And most people that you talk to in the sterile medical industry, either you have a passion for it or you don't.
Right.
So everybody here at DDL has got a true passion for what we're doing to, again, bring safe and effective products to market.
Thank you. That's great. I believe that wraps up our Part 2 PackReview series this year. We hope you enjoyed this discussion and were able to take some valuable pieces back to your work. If you have any questions or should need any assistance, please visit our website at ddltesting.com.